Hi, I'm Alex Burning, and today I want to talk with you about World War I, in particular, how it started and how it was so different from every other war that happened before then. First, I'd like to talk about my personal exploration of this subject. I've done a fair bit of research on this over the last year. I've read a little bit and I've listened to a lot of podcasts on World War I, and it's a very interesting conflict to me. I think it's often overshadowed by World War I, which is more recent in history and is also a little easier to understand in terms of who was the good guys, who was the bad guys. World War I was a much more gray affair. There was no Hitler figure who was just evil from the outset that you could automatically side against. And I think part of that is what makes it such an interesting affair is seeing all the different countries and how they all ended up being drawn into this huge conflict. So, how did World War I start? Well, the inciting incident was the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, who was the Archduke of Austria Hungary, which is a country just below Germany. He was assassinated while on a tour in the Serbian province of Sarajevo, which was initially a Serbian and Bosnian its own nation before it was annexed by Austria-Hungary in 1909, which was just 5 years ago. And the people of that city and the Serbians in general were very nationalistic, and they did not like the Austria-Hungarians very much. And the prompting for that this led to the assassination attempt by Gavrilo Princip, who was a Serbian nationalist. Now, how this happened was kind of interesting. There was an assassination attempt by some of Gavrilo Princip's cohorts, but it failed. And after that, due to the parade car taking a wrong turn, the Franz Ferdinand ended up just feet away from Gavrilo Princip, who then saw the opportunity, took out his gun, and shot both Franz Ferdinand and his wife. Now, this immediately sparked a reaction from Austria-Hungary, who pretty much immediately wanted to go to war with Serbia over this incident. And they ended up sending an ultimatum to Serbia with an unreasonable list of demands that Serbia had no way of actually being able to meet. And it basically guaranteed that there was going to be a war. Now, before Austria-Hungary was able to declare this war, they needed to make sure that they would have their backs covered because Serbia was allied with Russia, who was a much more formidable power, and Austria-Hungary did not want to have to go to war with them and Serbia at the same time. So they went to their allies, Germany, whom they had a defensive pact with, and they asked them, are you going to help us out if we invade Serbia? The editors at History.com wrote about this in their article, World War I, which was last updated October 29, 2009. And they said, of the German leader, the Kaiser Wilhelm, they said, quote, Kaiser Wilhelm secretly pledged his support, giving Austria-Hungary a quote-unquote blank check assurance of Germany's backing. So Austria-Hungary knew that Germany would help fend off the Russians if and when the Russians came to the aid of the Serbian country. So with that in mind, Austria-Hungary immediately declared war on Serbia, and Germany knew that they were going to have to go to war with Russia. At the same time, though, Russia and France had been growing closer together as superpowers on the world stage, and Germany was sandwiched right in the middle. Germany definitely knew that France would probably end up getting pulled into this war as well, and they had already fought a war with France, and they were not close at all. They were definitely enemies. So Germany decided that the best course of action would be to knock out France very quickly at the start of the war and then flip their full attention to Russia because Russia was going to take a long time to mobilize. So how they planned to do this was not by attacking what Dan Carlin describes as, on his Hardcore History podcast, The Blueprint for Armageddon, October 30th, 2013, the French had a wall of forts along the French-German border, which would have been almost impossible for the Germans to break through with any meaningful speed in time for them to get back and fight the Russians. So what the Germans ended up deciding to do was going for, as Dan Carlin puts it, the quote-unquote soft underbelly of France by attacking through the neutral country Belgium. Now, they didn't want to go to war with Belgium because Belgium was allied with Britain. Well, they had a loose defensive pact, but Germany didn't want to risk war with them, but it was the only way to knock out France quickly that they saw. So they went to Belgium and they asked them, if they would just let them go through quickly, and they wouldn't war them at all. They just wanted to go through their lands. They'd even like pay them back for it and whatnot. But Belgium said no, and they actually they sabotaged their own bridges and roads to make it harder for the Germans to get to France. This led to the Germans declaring war directly on Belgium, and after conquering most of their way through the small country of Belgium, Britain eventually joined the war to help them out. So that is more or less the setup of how all the major powers got pulled into this. There are many other smaller nations, like the Ottoman Empire, they came in, and some other countries as well. And that kind of led this to being such the worldwide conflagration that it ended up being. So what exactly differentiates World War I from any of the previous wars? What made it so significant? And to start this off, I'll go with a quote, or a statistic rather. So over the course of World War I, which was 1914 to 1918, over 7 million soldiers died, and over 9 million civilian casualties were lost. So that's roughly like 16 million people just directly from the war. And this was in the very early 1900s. For context, in the 1860s was the American Civil War, and that lasted about the same amount of time, and there was 1 million deaths in that. So there was a massive step up in the number of casualties, numbers of deaths that happened in this war. And well, what exactly caused that? Well, there's a lot of inventions at this time. Most of this can be seen as, or can be attributed to the massive industrialization and the invention of new weapons and technology at the time. For example, machine guns and artillery, which became significantly more effective. Up until this point, artillery consisted mostly of just cannons. You pointed it straight at the enemy, you shot, you could arc it a little bit. Now you had heavy artillery, which could shoot for long distances, very accurate, much heavier shells. The Germans had a 750 kilogram artillery piece, which could fire up to 30 miles. So humongous ranges, sustained fire, all of that. Royd Smith and Showalter write in their Encyclopedia Britannica entry for World War I, which was modified last June 7, 2019, machine guns and rapid-firing artillery in combination with trenches and barbed wire gave a decided advantage to the defense. Their rapid and sustained firepower could decimate a frontal assault by infantry or cavalry. And that is where the majority of losses in this war came, is just the trench warfare, one side just having to throw units at the other, and them being mowed down by like the hundreds, if not thousands. Some other inventions that happened at this time were flamethrowers were invented now. The use of poison gases like mustard gas or chlorine gas got brought into the war. Airplane technology, along with telephone lines, let the artillery fire be much more precise and much more accurate and consistent than it had been before this time. So there's a lot of individual things that combine together to the greater whole to make this conflict so dangerous. In conclusion, we've learned what initially started this war and some of the things that made it really different, and how it's shaped and changed warfare as a whole, and how countries interact with each other even today. Thank you.